Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila! You get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find brilliant people inside and outside the world of HR to talk to you about what's going on in HR data, analytics, technology, and process. Today, I have with me my friends from Sapient Insights. Hello, Sapient Insights.
Hello, David.
Hi, David.
It was almost timed perfectly. Thank you. That was Susan Richards and Teri Zipper and some guy with a cart in the background. Like a shopping cart that's got a bum wheel, always. And we have with us today a new principal consultant, Sheryl Herle, who just started how many weeks ago?
Oh, a year ago.
Oh, it's a year ago now. Oh.
It's all relative in COVID time frame, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's
Pre-COVID, post-COVID.
Post-COVID,
Right.
all morphs, yeah.
The world of time stands still in
Yes,
pre-COVID.
it does.
So today we're going to have a fun conversation about talent analytics, workforce analytics, people analytics. We're going to talk about what you found in this year's survey, the new Sapient Insights survey on HR technology.
The 25th anniversary version of the survey.
But now it is formally owned by Sapient Insights.
It is.
Correct.
That's something to celebrate.
It is always something to celebrate.
And the fact that it's 25 years old talks about the longevity and the usefulness of the data from the survey.
Yes.
So thank you for doing it from the entire industry. So, why don't we first start with one of my favorite things to do on the HR Data Labs podcast? What's one thing that no one knows about you? Sheryl, you're in the hot seat.
Oh, wow. Gosh. I'm a pretty open book, so people know a lot about me.
Wow. Come on. One thing.
And I'm looking at others like, what don't you know about me? As if they're able to answer.
So Susan, it may have been Pam who answered this one when
Yeah?
we did
What
the
was the
podcast
answer?
last year with Sapient Insights.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could, if you'd like to, if you could
Sure,
give
I'll hop in with
Sheryl
something.
Okay.
I sang in choir in college.
You did.
I did.
Anything you want to give a rendition of right now?
Not right now. I need a few more drinks.
Yes, and by the way,
Come
they're
see me
drinking
at the
sugary
karaoke bar.
drinks. Okay, we'll have to do that later.
Sugary drinks.
Teri, how about you? Anything you'd like to confess to?
I once worked at a cemetery, and I used to draw the plots for the burials. So this is a very interesting job,
Very.
where the funeral director would call me and say, "Hey, Teri, Miss Smith died, and she's in, Holy Rosary 25." So I'd go get the big deed book out.
Sure.
And look for her plot, and then I have to draw the map for the gravediggers to go out
Sure.
and dig the plot.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
it's laudable because needed to happen. People needed to grieve.
Yeah, I never knew that existed until I actually had to do it.
Fascinating set of
See,
skills.
and I was being way too analytical because I was thinking something that nobody knows about me, but that's a big
Well,
one,
you
right?
can have some people knowing about you. It's going on a podcast, so it's going to
Yeah.
be that audience.
Everybody's going to know it once you say
Yeah.
it.
You didn't want your
Well,
deep, dark
I would
secret.
love-
No, that's what I'm thinking. Like, what are my dark secrets that I want to bring out of the closet right now? No. But yeah,
Doesn't need to be
interesting
that deep,
jobs.
no.
A
That's the
very
other
similar
podcast.
one. But I worked for the RCMP for a summer, and I got to be the girl that put the lineups together. So the cops would come in and essentially say, "We think this guy did it. Find 6 other people to put in the photo lineup that looks similar to this individual."
Okay,
Oh
so
my
just to
God.
translate, she's talking about the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
from Canada.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So you put the schedules together for the police.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
Worked
cool.
in that photo room one
Wow.
summer. Yeah. The things we did
That
to
sounds
make
cool.
money, right?
Yeah. So that ends the entertainment portion of the show.
It'll get better. It'll get better.
Definitely gets better.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
So let's talk about it. One of the things that we'd love to hear from you is what's the perspective you gained from the survey that maybe surprised you about what's happening with analytics today?
Hi, we're Meg and Amy from The Meg and Amy Show.
We're not only tech execs and big picture thinkers, we're also best friends.
We're curious learners. And on this podcast, we're challenging the status quo and activating the future.
And we're going to give advice about work and leadership, right, Meg?
You know, we can't help ourselves. But this podcast is about exploring possibility, not being right.
That sounds refreshing.
For more, tune in to The Meg and Amy Show.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that we're just, this is our launch for the survey, right? We unveil our data tomorrow morning, in fact, and our survey data is collected back in May, June, July is sort of when we run the survey. And we haven't been here. We haven't been here for a couple of years. I mean, last year there was a small group here, but coming in this year, HR Tech is back. Like the show feels bigger than ever. The booths are spectacular.
Sure.
Vendors have put a lot of money being back in here, and yet not a lot has changed, right? We're still struggling with some of those same HR problems. There's different interfaces on stuff, and people have some unique solutions going on. So when you really try and look for like what's new in the industry, I think there's more vendors than ever, but are we really hitting the mark with the right thing? And then when we marry what we see here with what we're hearing in the data, that's where it's really interesting, because we're seeing that people are still struggling with a lot of the same things. They're still upset with their vendors for some of the same usability issues or the same configuration issues or the lack of reporting capability, those kinds of things. So I think that's interesting and worth diving into to say, why aren't we moving the needle on that? Why is the industry rich with money, but we're not putting it towards the problems that HR is still having?
Well, one of the problems that we've had to help companies with a lot is fixing their underlying data before they actually start on the process.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of shocking to me that in 2022, we're still dealing with terrible demographic data in really expensive, really
fancy systems,
very fancy HRIT and enterprise systems like Oracle, SAP, PeopleSoft, ADP systems. And we spend a lot of time with clients fixing core data that you'd expect to be just pristine. So why hasn't that changed? Why hasn't that gotten sunlight? The data, the underlying data for these analytics.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. We were doing a workshop earlier this week, and it was on developing an HR technology strategy.
Right.
And one of the commonalities amongst almost everybody in the group, when we ask about what the obstacles are to presenting and are developing and presenting an HR technology strategy, was a mistrust of the data quality. And it was really interesting because the people in the room, we had 300 people in the room, and most of them practitioners, people who live, eat, sleep, breathe data and technology. Right. And they were all very confident in their data. Where there was lack of confidence was at the manager and the executive level. And I believe there's even a fear of presenting data to those levels because there is such mistrust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tragedy. I think we've got to fix that.
One of the fun anecdotes that I usually tell when I present on people analytics is the old story of going into the CFO's office to try and defend headcount data. And they'd say, we have X number and you have Y number. Why are they different? And the immediate point, their immediate finger point is HR data is always wrong.
Right.
But I say, well, we're counting different things. You're counting GL butts and seats, or you're counting GL headcount, FTEs maybe, and I'm counting butts and seats, so it's completely different.
Right.
And those butts may be full-time employees, they may be contingent workers, they may be consultants, they may be part-timers, they may be job shares, they may be volunteers.
And what day and hour did you pull your data, and did the overnight feed already go through in the UK? And it's so data is imperfect, but it's and we get hung up on that, and it's always just an indicator. Like we know that things, if someone said to you it's 72 degrees out today, well, do you just sort of trust that? Like it's kind of around this weather where I'm going to put this kind of clothing on? Yeah. Like, do we need to know if it's exactly 71 or 73?
So
Or
I-
if you lived in Massachusetts, you'd have to wear a sweater in the morning because it's probably 50.
Yeah, just layer
And then it
up
gets to
and go
71.
with your day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But we get really hung up on the numbers and trying to point the finger that,
Yeah.
well, your data is wrong, and therefore we dismiss the whole
Exactly.
discussion that goes along with it.
That's right.
One of the things that we're really focused on from now until the next couple of years is trying to help our HR partners become better business people.
Yeah.
And our data tells us that for the last 5 to 7 years, there's not been a marked increase in the number of organizations that say their HR partners are truly strategic partners. It's like 46% right now.
Yeah.
And our goal is
it's
to
been
help.
static
And it
for
has been
years,
static
right?
for the last 5 to 7 years. And we're really trying to work with our HR partners to help them get better stats. So we're encouraging and challenging our HR partners to get to 55% being seen as a strategic partner by the 2025 HR Technology Conference so that we can report out better data or better results.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I think we can do that is start at the individual level and work with those HR partners, those data technologists, to help them start to tell the story around their data.
Right.
And rather than backing away when someone challenges their data,
Right.
explain what's behind the data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tell the story with the data.
Right.
And be confident about your
Yeah.
numbers, even though they're guidelines or directional numbers.
Yeah, I mean, there are
Have a
always
strategy
reasons.
behind that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't need a page of assumptions. You just need to be confident in what you say.
Right, and be able to talk about it intelligently
Right.
and in the terms that the rest of the business can understand.
Absolutely.
And that just means that the people at the board level, from an HR perspective, whether that's the CHRO or the VP of talent or the head of compensation, who's oftentimes at the board meeting, right? They can defend those numbers, right? It's not just about, being able to give them the reports. They've got to
Right.
be able to defend the data. And it was one of the things we talked about at our session was the fact that the practitioner, the people on the HR functional side, need to really understand their technology and what they've got and how it's helping drive the business and, how it's generating business outcomes for them.
Well, one of the reasons why we got this reputation is because we didn't know the business. We were administrators.
Exactly.
And we were pencil pushers or paper pushers or both. And a lot of times, and you guys have seen
Now we're button pushers.
Button pushers in many ways.
But because what we've done is we've just taken the forms we had in that manila envelope, the personal action form, and just made it
Automated.
webified, right, automated. And is it adding more value? Well, no, not really.
No.
And so we're still managing those processes. Even during COVID, what did HR have to do? We had to count people. We had to figure out whether they were home short or they were still coming to the office, what they had to. And we were still doing a lot of the, I guess you could say, compliance work for the government on, the COVID numbers. And so instead of being seen as cheerleaders, which we're not, instead of being seen as strategists, which we're trying to be, we were seen as that connective tissue, which is a nice thing to be thought of, but we still weren't adding the business value, or we still weren't seen as adding the business value to be strategic.
And I think a lot of my HR colleagues were afraid to step in that limelight. They were afraid because they weren't confident in the data. They weren't confident in their processes. They weren't confident that they were going to be able to stand up and defend what they were telling the business.
And by the way, from what I've seen about the data, they have absolutely every right to not feel confident about the data. And that's something we just got to get better at.
Got to fix that.
Yes.
But it's not the technology's fault. It's the processes we put into the technologies that have messed it up. And so a lot of times what we're doing is spending time fixing those processes, fixing the underlying, whether it's the onboarding process or whether it's the job change process or the promotion process, to codify things better.
And I don't think that's going to change. I mean, given the number of processes that we have and the acquisitions and the business growth, to me, I mean, fixing people's data is a retirement strategy.
Yeah. It's never going to be perfect.
It's
Right.
never going to end
Right.
at some level. I mean, some companies are going to be really good at it, but there's always going to be somebody who needs it, right?
Yeah.
It's always, I always tell my husband, he'll see somebody dressed in this outfit that looks like it's from the 70s, right? And it's got the 70s hairdo and everything. And it's like, it's always somebody's 70s, okay?
Right. It's true.
It's always the 70s for someone. And I think, it's the same way for data. It's always going to be somebody's 70s.
Yeah, I don't think I've been in an organization for any length of time when you kind of really dig into the data and then someone will tell you, oh, that field? Oh, well, that was because we needed a field to stick things into and that one allowed for 6 digits. So we actually stuck the hire date in that field. But when you pull it on a report, it actually means something like you had to have that legacy knowledge to figure that out. And to your point around acquisitions and stuff, we're seeing more and more of that. And I think, there is something to be challenged out to the vendors that are here too, because they rush implementations and they don't go in and they don't care about the client's data. And I don't know how we ever get that to happen, but they're layering on the fancy systems, but no one's going in and doing the core work, and that never gets included in business cases to go back and clean data. And it's always just like, we need to get this done now. And, so you're still just serving up nice dashboards in a different look, but you're not actually changing, the data and the numbers that are coming through.
Well, that's
the reports
expensive.
Don't look like what they're supposed to look like because the data's a mess, right?
Yeah.
You get your first report and you're like,
this looks like crap. What we've been telling people going through an acquisition is add in time and add in budget to fix the damn data and process before you go into a new system.
Right.
It's kind of like taking all your old crap from your old car and taking a brand new car and taking all the dust and the mold and
the French fries under the seat.
Exactly. And just throwing it into the new car. You'd never do that, would you?
Yeah.
Well, why would you do that with your HR system? But it's exactly what we're doing. You're not going to extract the old oil. You're not going to take the oil filter. You're not going to take the gas out of the old car. Leave it there. Start fresh.
Yeah. But this goes back to how things are business cased. And this is a passion for me is, let's really think about what this project is going to take. Yeah. Let's not just take the number that we got from the vendor and pad that a little bit and stick that in our business case. The vendor is giving us one thing, but again, they're going to rush us through an implementation because they want to go live and they want to recognize the revenue.
Right.
And then you get into a project and you realize you don't have the time and the money and the people and the resources and the right skills to actually deal with the data. So then you're like, well, we're going to go live because we've already set a date, but we'll just work on the data later. Right?
But that's why
it doesn't work.
Well, one of the things I've told companies who are in that situation is, before you even start with the vendor selection, what are your goals?
Right.
Are you just changing systems because somebody thinks, what was the term? You never get fired for implementing Workday?
Yeah. Well, back in the day, it was a different vendor, but yeah.
Right? but why are you moving systems? What was the critical issue that system wasn't doing?
What are you trying to solve for?
What are you trying to solve for?
Yeah.
And then ask what the return on your investment is going to be. And one of those should be, we're going to get a new system that has new capabilities that we don't have right now because our company's growing and the old system can't handle it.
Right.
That's important.
And so what we hear in the survey and why people are moving is the clients are screaming out and saying, we just can't do enough with our data. So great, we've got these BI tools, we can do nice dashboards, but we don't have the skills. We didn't spend the time doing the training in the project. So we've got this live tool, but no one knows how to use it. And most people that we're finding in the research are sitting on a system that's 5 to 7 years old right now. So what we're seeing this year is they're ready to change their reporting analytics tools. And a huge portion of them, which is kind of surprising, is they're not using the tools that are embedded in the platforms. So vendors are building out all these tool sets and clients still aren't using them. And they're moving more to core, BI tools that are layered on top of data warehouses. So, we're seeing Microsoft BI take over more market share, and surprisingly, even Google and Amazon's analytics tools,
Really?
So it's changing the industry a little, right?
Sure.
And we've got vendors here that are spending a ton of money trying to put together the nicer dashboard and more capability on the dashboard. But then we hear clients through our surveys saying, oh, I couldn't change how it looked. So I still had to export it and move it over to Excel so that I could move it into our colors or,
because we all know colors are one of the most important things when you're reviewing a dashboard.
Absolutely, because if those
really
executives see those bar charts in the wrong colors, obviously doesn't mean anything.
One of the things we had in our presentation in the workshop on Monday was a question about how do you know when it's time to change your HRIS system?
Right.
And the first thing that popped into my head was that every answer from the HRIS team is that it's a data export.
Right.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Like every time you need to do something, well, we just need to export the data.
So it means you're working around your system.
Right.
You're not
Right.
actually
Not with
using
it.
it anymore.
yeah. I mean, I felt like that was sort of the number one.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about that for a second. Tools exist today, that APIs are there, that ETLs exist, that, in fact, ETLs exist to the extent that they have the native interfaces already built with most of the systems on this floor, where they don't need to leave. Maybe what they're really needing is a better integration tool that enables them to get out the data the way they want to and be able to then use the Power BI or the whatever, the Tableau or whatever the tool set is du jour.
I mean, we have to recognize we've come a long way, right? It's not all custom reports, so you had to write out your requirements and send them into IT and wait for 18 months to get your report spit out, right? Like there's a lot of tools and reports that are packaged within these systems, right? Like many of these vendors, they've got 800 custom reports that are already in, or 800 package reports that are already in there. Some that you can customize. But people will always find a unique way. It's like ingredients for a menu, right? They're always going to want to take them and make it into something a little bit different.
Because Nana did it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Well, I don't like it placed like that, right? So there'll always be reasons why people want to play with their data and make it look different. But I think the other interesting thing I'm seeing at this show is that some of that AI is coming into some of the analytics tools, where it's not just here's how you visualize and the 50 million different metrics you can put on a dashboard, but a few of the vendors that I talked to today are now building in these little smart nudges, if you will. So watching absentee data and then suddenly sending the manager a nudge to say, hey, Sheryl's been off 4 times in the last 6 weeks. Can someone check in with her? And I think that's what's getting brilliant.
I think that's a cry for help, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
You don't think that's ethical?
No, I mean, I think what you're telling them is that you need to have a conversation with them.
You need to have a conversation. Something's going on.
No, but
that's just that example of really...
Ethical? No, I think it's phenomenal.
I think it is too, because it's like nobody has time, and nor are you going to watch that kind of stuff on a dashboard as a manager.
No.
Right?
You'll never process it.
Right. But when it suddenly gets fired off to HR and it gets fired off to the manager to say, can someone just check in? There's something anomaly or some anomaly is showing up in the data.
Right.
So let's ping somebody to look at the anomaly rather than just looking at reports and numbers and metrics.
What's the harm in it too? We're not talking about talking to them about a raise or talking to them about why they might be leaving. They're not saying that. It's saying,
just
give
FYI.
Sheryl a call.
Yeah.
Right. And those are things where ethics aren't a problem. Where we start getting into the ethical problems is that, well, Sheryl hasn't been promoted in a certain period of time. Maybe you should talk to her about that and tell her what the other job openings are going to be. Well,
hint. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so the problem with that is that, first of all, I don't really know that you're about to leave. And I don't know if you really hate your job. And maybe if I introduce those other concepts to you, you're going to be like, does Teri and Susan want me to leave? Why are they? Why are they?
I mean, the data nudge shouldn't cause actions that are just not thought about, right? Like the data can always only be robotized so much, and then you need a human to kind of look at it and go, okay, so this is what this is telling me, and this is what I should probably do, right?
And that human actually has to make judgment calls and have some common sense about them. They can't look at a policy and say, this is what I do in this situation.
Right.
And my experience with some of our newer managers is that they're looking for that, not even a recipe book, but a checklist of exactly what I do when. And critical thinking skills, I think, are at a premium at this point.
Well, training managers has always been a challenge, right? How do you train good management technique? How do you use signals that you're getting to be able to find the right time to have that conversation or not to? And there are tons of companies out on the floor that have automated, and especially one that I used to work with at ADP, that used to have an automated push to the manager about, here are things we see in your organization, and here's how you should be communicating to your teams. Now, whether the managers did that or not was really based on their background, but it was trying to push the managers in the back to actually have what should have been proactive and positive conversations, but managers did not have training, or they didn't think managers needed the training to be able to utilize those things. And so it's still, it's the Peter principle. You're promoting someone to their greatest level of inadequacy or, incompetence. Thank you. Yeah, there it is. Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself,
Man, I wish I could talk to David about this. Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast. A free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today.
So we've seen then that there are certain groups on the floor that are nudging and using AI to kind of give hints as to what people might do with the data and with the analytics. What else have you seen that's kind of been interesting to you as you walked the floor and as you looked at your research?
I think what's fascinating when, immediately walking the floor to see some of the vendor brand names, they're now huge. I'm like, whoa. Like, I remember these guys in a startup mode 6 years ago. Like, they're huge now, right? So people are looking for third-party BI solutions. It's definitely a category that's growing within the whole HR tech space.
I think one of them you might be talking about is like Visier.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, they're a good old Canadian
They're not a startup
company.
anymore, right?
No,
I mean,
not at
they're
all.
huge.
Yeah.
And they're like the 800-pound gorilla. And what I wanted to talk to you about those are, think about that kind of a company. What they are right now is a data ingestion and a data platform that provides out-of-the-box just incredible analytics. I'm a big fan of Visier's.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of their folks on the program. In fact, we have Ian Cook tomorrow. We had Zach Johnson today. And one of the things I love about Visier is that they don't try and be too much, but they have those pieces or those modules that people can adopt. And over time, they can grow and take everything, or they can just focus on little things. And they're actually doing a lot of embedding too.
Yeah.
So I love what they're trying to do. But there are obviously lots of new competitors in the space as well.
Well, and my fear for them is that they're specific to HR. And I think what is, if you want to think predictions now, I think, the folks like the Microsofts are going to win out, right? Because they're always going to be selling into that CIO, and we're going to have that core technology infrastructure that, someone is always going to say, well, we've already got that. Why do we need to go and get a special HR, analytics tool?
package, yeah.
Analytics is analytics at the end of the day. So why aren't we just using the tools we've already got?
And we'll build out the domain because we know it, right? We know how to do a headcount report. We know how to calculate turnover. And so that's one of those things, though, that they underestimate when they start the project and they're building it out on Power BI.
Yeah.
And then they realize later on that the domain wasn't so
well, and then my other fear on Power BI is it takes a skill set to use. So we go right back to where we were 15 years ago about writing our requirement and putting it into the specialists in the IT department to get our HR report out, right?
Well, and I think that, and it's one of the things I said to the people at Visier was, they almost need to be the Intel inside.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody wants to buy a dashboard, and look at your analytics. They want those analytics
where
real
they're doing
time.
the work.
Yes,
in the process.
Absolutely.
But the beauty,
embedded.
too, and I'm going to say it in the Canadian way, Visier, when they first started, one of their competitive advantages was they had the benchmark data, or they at least had the KPIs and the metrics kind of sorted out for HR.
Yeah.
And they said, these are the 100 things that HR should track.
Yes.
And so we've already built that into the product. And that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And that was only, 10 years ago, whatever it was, I don't know, time flies. But nobody else was doing that. They were just saying, well, tell us what your data is, and then we can show you how to make it look pretty, right? And they took it that extra step.
Right.
So I hope we don't lose that, because we need that. We need that consistent KPI data model in our industry, and we all have to start comparing apples to apples, right? So we can make the argument too that, well, Power BI doesn't work for us because we're not finance. We don't have the same metrics as finance. We don't have the same metrics as sales, right? We have very specific industry benchmarks that we track and monitor.
Yeah, but remember that conversation we had before about that crappy data in HR and sticking that 6-digit code in that field instead of hire date? That's the problem.
Yes.
If you're going to plug in any system like Power BI or whatever, and somebody's going to use standards to say, here's how turnover gets calculated, if you didn't use the fields as they should have been, then you have a lot of work to do to fix what was broken on implementation.
Yes.
And so that means, but when you go to Visier, they actually accommodate for that in the implementation.
Yeah.
If you've screwed up your field mapping, they'll fix it in the field mapping.
Let's make this work.
They make it work part of their implementation strategy. So a lot of this comes back to data and comes back to, can you afford to have crappy data in your core HR system? Because it's going to drive a lot of the behaviors that you have in ingesting and utilizing the people analytics going forward.
Right. And this is where HR needs to get more strategic too, because there's so much data. So how do you really zero in on what's important and what drives the business and what metrics executives need to pay attention to?
And that's why I go back to the core processes and develop all of those data and to try and fix the most important, impactful, like onboarding, and then promotion, job change, termination.
Yeah.
And what does that affect? That affects term reasons, that affects the job table, that affects the core employee demographics. And then we can talk about DE&I, right?
Yeah.
You can't do DE&I metrics without actually having a lot of that employee demographics data and having it correct.
Yeah, so this is a little insight into tomorrow morning because we're so close. We'll sneak out some of our findings. But one of the questions that we ask HR is, so what are you using this data for, right? What are you using your HR analytics tools for? And compliance used to be top of the list for years, right? Of course, we're just producing reports for compliance. Sure. What was beautiful to see this year is that HR metrics in general are generally, still leading. But DE&I was number 2 this year.
That's awesome.
HR has now started to shift and use their data for pertinent business issues that are happening today. Because the next one on the list is employee engagement, and then we've got retention and managing HR costs. So it's all stuff that we're seeing right now around who are we hiring, how are we doing in that whole recruitment market, how are we retaining people in today's hot competition market, right?
That's great.
So I'd like to see more progress over the next couple of years in business-focused metrics for HR. So I love the fact
just headcount.
I love the fact that DEI is number 2. I'd love to see something like return on investment, or time to productivity, productivity per employee, or revenue generated per employee, and those are the things that the business cares about. And so we as HR professionals have to get out there, ask the business, what is it that you need from us?
Right.
And it's not a turnover report. It's not a headcount report.
Agree.
Yeah.
Because the managers get that and they yawn.
They don't care.
They don't have any business use for that unless they're being asked for headcount reduction, and then you're showing them their headcount numbers, and they go, "All right, let's take a top 10%."
Well, and even that, someone needs to translate that into what's our actual labor cost then. If our headcount is moved from this to that, how has that affected the bottom line?
Right. But it's another thing. Maybe I'm going to get more complicated than I need to. But then let's talk about what skills we're going to lose if we lose those people, and are we going to have to hire back at more money later on? Those exact skills which are going to walk out the door.
You mean we're going to hire them back as consultants?
Yeah.
For more money.
Now we get into the gig worker conversation. Yes, yeah.
Thank goodness. But this is where we always make that big mistake, right?
Yeah.
We always let people go and then realize later on, oh shit, we need that skill. We have
that
to hire
institutional
them back.
knowledge, that skill set.
And if we really get to a world where we've got some of our vendors that are playing in this talent mobility space really being effective in the next 5 years or so, what do the new HR metrics look like then, right? Because we're just moving talent around. And hopefully there's good metrics about what that movement does for the organization, not just counting FTEs.
Yeah, I wish they cared about that. I wish they cared about it now, especially as we're going into a recession, a recessionary period. Because now they need that data now.
Yeah. And actually, that's interesting. We just had a chat about this before we rolled in here, was seeing some players in the market now that are working on analytics solutions for who you offboard when you're faced with, we got to cut the labor force by 20% or whatever magic number is going to happen during a recession, right? But how do you start doing that and doing it with some sort of data and some criteria that's pumped through a system as opposed to just some subjective exercises.
Right now it's a list of salaries, right?
Yeah.
And where can we cut the biggest, the fastest?
Yeah, but one manager is thinking that, and the other manager is thinking, well, I'm just going to cut people that are going to be most expensive to severance that have been here the longest, right? Even though they may not have the highest salaries.
Yeah.
So how do you take, some problem like that and apply the right data criteria and run that against your database and at least create this short list that says, okay, here's 1,000 people that meet that criteria, but now, to our point, put the logical human
Exactly.
Where's the human
intervention on
judgment
there,
in that?
right? And then make your judgment based on that short list.
And maybe we should look at first what postings we have open.
Right.
And see if there's any way.
Maybe we should be moving people around.
You mean talent mobility?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still an issue. It was an issue. It was interesting that last year in our data, that was one of our most significant findings, is that organizations, even crying out for talent and having hundreds of openings, still weren't leveraging the talent that they have in their organization. And this idea of, I can't let Susie go because Susie's too important to my organization.
Right.
Susie's going to walk out the door.
Managerial myopia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's also hoarding.
Yes, I was just going to say, hoarding FTE, because you don't want to lose that head count, so don't let that talent move around.
We used to encourage managers at many of the organizations I worked for, Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, we encourage managers to promote people or let them go. Because we had analysts, we had the feeder programs that we could use to bring in other people and keep putting people through the career ladder. And so we didn't like holding on to talent. And that's why I went to London to do the comp manager role in London for Morgan Stanley, because they said, hey, you're the best comp analyst that we have in the US. Do you want to go overseas and actually be a comp manager? I was like, yeah. They said, have you ever been to London? No. You sure you want to do this? I'm in my 20s, yeah.
Of course.
Exactly. But they encourage that kind of stuff.
Well, and I worked for the opposite organizations, who many of them had a policy where you couldn't move anywhere within a year, right? So even though the job board is open for you once you become an employee, and the organization's 40, 50, 60,000 people big and tons of opportunity, you may have landed in the wrong department or wrong role, or not even knew that this other job function existed. But no, you couldn't move within a year. And it was just sort of ridiculous HR policies.
And this is where policies trip us up all the freaking time.
Yeah.
Why do we still have that crap? Do they still exist? And if they do, why? Always ask that 3-letter question. Why? Why do we allow ourselves to get put in that position?
Yeah, but I mean, when you think about now how systems can play a game in that, if I could not have to go tell my manager I was even looking at the job board, God forbid, but if I could just indicate that I was interested in a move, and then someone else could say, okay, here's a flag again. Why is this person 6 months in and not liking current role, but still interested in staying with our company and now interested in a lateral move? Someone needs to talk to her, but maybe not her manager, because that's obviously a sensitivity.
And here's how the technology gets in your way, because when you log into the career site, it says you're not eligible to review careers yet because you've only been here 1 year.
Well, yeah, today they'd have the policy built into the system to shut you out.
Yeah. That sucks. Why do we do that? It just kills us.
Yeah.
We're kneecapping ourselves. We're literally Tanya Harding ourselves, if that's still a phrase.
So the interesting thing that I usually find when I ask 6 levels of why, I'm working with a client and they say, this is the way we do it. Well, why are we doing it that way?
Right.
Well, because this is good practice, or this is best practice, or our consultant told us to do it. Well, why did they tell you to do it that way? And you keep digging.
Right.
And ultimately what you get down to is somebody, somewhere, 20 years ago, made a mistake and got smacked for it. Their CEO was upset, their head of HR was upset, it got out in the public.
Yeah.
And so instead of solving for that problem, they've solved for the edge case. And codified it. And now it's like a best practice.
Yes.
And it's what in the world are we doing?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that you're making me think about this, that, HR isn't thinking right now. They're swamped, right? They're barely able to keep their head above water. Yeah. They've lost a ton of women in the workforce, and let's face it, mostly women in HR still. And, they can't recruit fast enough. So are they really going to think about their data this year or next year? Probably not.
But God, I hope so, because without it, we're not going to be able to make good business decisions, to Susan's point.
Of course not.
Why we can't make 50%
but I also think that
being strategic.
Yeah, and I also think that they're not going to take on big projects in the next couple of years, because they're just literally keeping their heads above water. Every HR person I know is so burnt out. And, so as much as I see all these vendors here, and I think some of them are fabulous, and absolutely every company should be using you, I just wonder if we're going to see a real slowdown in IT projects in general, because we just don't have the capacity to absorb those projects right now.
And we might couch it in we can't afford it.
And the fear of recession, and we better not spend money because what if? Yeah.
Right.
So, my fingers are crossed that we're getting better, we're smarter, but are we actually going to take action in the next year or two?
Have you ever
breathe.
thought about why we shouldn't be leaning into investments in downturns so that when the growth comes, we're able to actually handle it?
Our airline
a
industry
business-
is a perfect example
Yeah.
right now.
Oh my
right?
God, yeah.
We
Or
should have been leaning
Minnesota.
in 2 years ago and getting ready for the flight traffic to come back. And
Minnesota with the nurses situation, right? They're obviously nurses are a really big commodity right now, and now the nurses are out on strike, and they're in a really great position because employees are basically demanding, and they're getting.
Well, I actually look forward to working with some of those courageous contrarian organizations
Yes.
that are willing to keep moving. And yes, we may go into a recession. Yes, we are still going to have a war for talent. Yes, we're still going to have all kinds of issues. And yes, we still have to solve business problems. And I'm actually looking forward to finding some of those organizations who are willing to keep pushing forward.
yeah, and hopefully finding smart organizations that say, you know what, we know, our operations or our sales is going to slow down for the next 1 to 2 years during a recession. But let's not make that a cut for HR too, right? Because if we
Right.
kept these
Right.
core functions employed and spinning the wheel and moving things forward in that sort of slow period, imagine
Exactly.
what it could be when it comes back.
Exactly. Let's fix the shit that's broken so that when the wheels start spinning fast, we all don't fall off.
Right.
And can we break some shit that has been
Fist bump.
in place too long?
And
needs
ask
to
the
be
6
refubbed.
levels of why.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Sapient Insights, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and we always go on for so much longer than everybody else because we have such cool things to talk about. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks,
We appreciate
David.
it.
And hopefully next year we'll come back and talk, and there wouldn't have been a recession.
Exactly.
And all those companies that we were talking about did great. And
We'll bring
people
6
fixed their
HR
data.
clients.
I was going to say,
transform
we'll
their
bring some of
world
those
and-
courageous
yeah.
organizations with
That'd be
us.
cool.
That's
That'd be
right.
great. Thank you very much. Take care.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.